Hype Network presents.
On this episode of Season 4, Let's Talk.
It's like a zoo. So we have four crocodiles. I can't even there was a time that we had more than 20 snakes in the house. We have eagles and we have yeah, we have bear cats. That's my dad. That's his.
On behalf of my guest here in the Rajiv Show, we would like to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Hey folks, welcome back to the Rajiv Show and another conversation on the list, and we have hit 60 plus in this guest list of the season 4 Let's Talk series. I can't believe it. It's December. Last month, I think, was the starting of, last 2 months ago, it was the starting of this project. And like I said, it is the super duper mega project of all time. And my guest today, of course, is also another member of the podcast PH community and an amazing person, actually, an amazing personality. So, guys, let me introduce my guest, Isabella Gimenez. Hey, girl, how you doing?
Hello. Hi, thanks for having me. This is my first time actually.
Yeah, this is gonna be fun. This is gonna be fun. The moment you're finished with this, I'm sure you'll have a lot of collaborators and a lot of conversations along the way. This is fun. And for those who don't know, my guest today, this is her first time collaborating with a fellow podcaster, mind you. So, let's just keep this interesting as always.
Yeah. Be nice to me. Be nice.
So, Isabel, could you give a little bit of background about yourself to my guest?
Okay, so I'm actually a veterinarian and I just started my podcast this year, June. I just wanted to start it because I just kept thinking whenever I discover something, it's like, or when I learn something, I realize, oops, there's so much more I didn't learn yet. So I'm just never quite there yet. So when I figure something out and then you discover something again and you realize there's always something new to discover.
Awesome. Awesome. Of course, let's take this back a bit. Before you've opened up the veterinarian conversation, let's talk about that later, and of course your podcast. But let's take this back a bit again, and let's go to let's just time travel to the past. I gotta ask,
Mm-hmm.
as usual in my show, if you and I were classmates in high school, who were you in high school? If you and I were classmates, are you in the front of the class or the back of the class, introverted, extroverted, or are you even inverted? If you were to classify yourself as a high school student.
Um, I was usually the quiet one, actually. But the bubbly one, the funny one, the bubbly one, the one who's always there for everyone, but still the wallflower. You get it? I'm not the star. I'm not the cheerleader. I was just the nerd. Basically, I had my glasses back then, curly hair. They call me Ugly Betty, basically.
Interesting.
That was me.
And then, what was it? What is your favorite subject when you mentioned, uh, uh, you, yeah, what is your
I
favorite
think my
subject?
favorite subject was science. I think my
Hmm.
favorite subject was science.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I like how the
Mm-hmm.
correlation of that connects to veterinarian, which is, I hope I pronounced it right. Um,
Yeah, you.
there's really interesting stuff going on here. What was the interest when you got into science? What was that? Do you have a pivotal moment where you said,
No,
I love science"? Like, is there any storytelling there behind that?
Um, Not really. I was just good at it. So I just understood it well. So I just really liked it. But getting into being a veterinarian, actually, I got influenced by my dad because my dad already had so many animals here. Like we had pet snakes, um,
Mm.
crocodiles, and everything. So I was the one helping him take care of his pets, his animals. Then soon after, um, that's what I wanted to do, be the vet. That's
Interesting.
why.
Interesting. So it all started with the love of animals. That's that's pretty interesting.
Yes.
I gotta imagine
My
probably
dad's love for animals.
interesting. I gotta imagine that that means the house is more like the Doctor Doolittle kind of
A
setup.
zoo.
Yeah.
It's like a zoo. So we have four crocodiles. I
Wow.
can't even there was a time that we had more than 20 snakes in the house.
Huh.
We have eagles and
Wow.
we have yeah, we have bear cats. That's my dad.
I
That's
gotta
his.
ask though. I mean, in the household, I'm sure animals. The nature of life is that they try to eat each other. How did you manage to referee all of them from preventing themselves from eating, or they were domesticating you managed to domesticate them?
No, of course that does happen, but we have cages to
Mm,
prevent it, and we
interesting.
separate them. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. This conversation. This is the rarest conversation I've ever had about animals and
Animals.
self improvement. But I do believe it has a correlation. Self improvement, once you're training animals, they have that certain self discipline that once they learn that,
Mm-hmm.
you learn some sort of influence from there in while you train other animals. I don't know if I'm right though. I mean, I heard that
Yeah.
some philosophy. I don't know how I made that how I made that interesting, but I've learned that when you domesticate animals, you're also domesticating how you train yourself, being a part of that, being a part of the pack, like
Yeah.
being,
The routine.
yeah, the routine.
Yeah.
And
No, definitely. Definitely.
this just turned into an interesting conversation. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. No, no, definitely. So we do falconry. So with the eagles, we train the eagles.
Hmm.
So we have to make sure that their diet is weighed by the gram,
Hmm.
like not too much, not too little. And
Hmm.
then we fly them at a certain time. And then if and then they have to be sure that the food is enough. I mean, ha- just the right amount, because if it's too much, then it won't come back. The eagle won't come back. If it's too little, it will not fly as long because it will want to get the food right away. So it's
I got a curious question here.
it's
You
yeah,
had
sure.
you said conditioning. When it comes to conditioning, I gotta ask though, how did the what is you mentioned you've got tons and tons of animals there at home. What is the animal that requires so much attention and so much, uh detail when it comes to
Oh,
conditioning? I'm just curious because the only animals that we have here at home is cats and dogs, and by luck here at home,
I
our cat, before our cat arrived our home, it was domesticated. So I was never a part of that training. It was part of another household, and then they came to the house. The animal came to the house and somehow gotten used to the environment. I gotta ask, what is that animal that requires the hardest domesticating training? I'm just curious.
um well though well the animal that requires so much attention is actually our dogs.
Oh,
But
really?
for it to be domesticated, yeah, for it to be the animal, for to it you mean like the exotic animals, like the wild animals, right?
Yeah.
And how to be let them be domesticated. um I think the crocodiles, actually, but if you don't touch them,
Hmm.
they also won't touch you. So yeah, I don't think we domesticated our crocodiles yet. I mean, we had one when
Yeah.
we would carry her and all when she was younger,
Huh.
but now she's kind of bigger and heavier, and it's harder to carry her now. So we don't touch her anymore. So the crocodiles we do not touch, but all the other animals we pet. So the bear cat, the eagles, the
Wow.
snakes we can touch, but the crocodiles now, not really.
Wow. I'm just amazed right now in this conversation. I'm learning a lot, and wow, this really fascinating, blowing my mind. I never really expected this to be right off the bat. I love it. I love it. And
Surprise.
I know. I'm really curious. Like household. I gotta ask though. This might be an interesting question to ask. If people, guests and friends come over, what is their initial reaction with all the animals they see at home? If you still stay in the
That's
same
right.
same neighborhood, or you still stay in the same home, what is their
Mm.
initial response to saying to the animals?
They're like, why can't you just have normal pets? No, but they're no, but they're like, wow, amazing. But in the back of their mind, why can't you just have normal pets? Why can't you be a normal family with normal pets? But nope, we're just not normal.
This is fascinating. I wanna lean towards the future from high school. Let's move the storytelling from high school to college. Um, what was
Mm-hmm.
the course that you were required? If hopefully our listeners out there, because this is an interesting conversation about animals, and I'm sure a lot of people love animals. I gotta ask, from my thoughts, if someone is interested in learning veterinarian, what are the courses that they are supposed to study in order to get to the next level, to learn training and stuff like that? What is the course? Because I'm sure the courses are much more different in college when it comes to learning veterinarian.
Well, in the Philippines, we have a 6 year course that's called Doctor of Veterinary Medicine.
Mm.
And it's just 6 years. Then after you graduate, you take a board exam, and then if you pass, you're a licensed veterinarian.
Mm. That's
S-
interesting. 6 years, eh? Wow. Isn't
6 years.
isn't nursing close to the same timeline, or 4 years? I'm just curious.
Nursing is 4 years.
4 years.
Dentistry is 6 years.
So it qualifies as a specific thing that requires training. That's really interesting. I'm just
Yes.
curious to ask. I'm really curious to ask any funny stories that about animals that you've encountered. I'm sure with all the animals at home, there were some funny moments saying, "Hey, this is going to be an interesting story to share for a podcast or for a catch up." Is there?
Oh, this was funny
Yeah.
because after the
Mm,
Typhoon
mm,
Haiyan,
yeah.
my dad told me after the typhoon, he walked around the house, or walked around the street, and then people would greet him, "Hey, is your crocodile still there, or was it able to go out?" That's what, I think that
Uh,
was funny. Everyone was like, "Is it still there, or is it out?" Because they'd be freaked out already.
must have been, yeah. It must have been a scary sight, because yeah. But
Because
so
our
far,
neighbors were worried, like,
I'm just curious. Like, how is the household? What's the structure of the household? Paint me a picture of how the household is. Is
oh,
is it like a big complex,
well,
or is it like Neverland with Michael Jackson? That's the thought that I had in my head.
no. Actually, it's not so big. It's not so big. It's just that we have before we just had our house, and then um our animals were just around our house, like in our dining room, in our living room, in our garage.
Huh.
It was everywhere. And then after Yolanda, after Haiyan, we were able to buy the lot beside us, so we
Oh.
converted that into like a place where we could put all the animals, so it's all there. And then that's where, and then last year, my dad, my parents, actually, my mom also, um, we decided to, well, my parents decided to put a clinic there.
Mm,
Um, so I have my clinic there, and I also have the pets there in one place, the one beside our house.
interesting. Interesting. I really love this conversation. I'm just I'm just curious if there's a given chance that you and I would meet. Hopefully, please don't bring your animals because I still have life. I still have life a huge life to live. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, no. After this pandemic, you're free to visit in Leyte anytime.
Oh, I love it. Oh, Leyte. Wow. Oh man, Leyte.
Yeah, I'm from Leyte.
Leyte. I heard there's a lot
Yeah.
of fascinating stuff there to discover, and
Beaches
yeah.
actually.
And wow, that's kind of weird because isn't that where history for those folks who don't know? Leyte is where General MacArthur in Philippine history. For those who don't know, it's just a little bit additional information. Is that General MacArthur when Japanese chased out the Americans? I don't know what year that was. MacArthur made a promise in Australia or something that he will return, and I think there's the statue there in Leyte somewhere in the ocean. Am I right? That's
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, not in the ocean though,
I mean
but
the seaside. I
they made
forgot
it
the
look
name.
like it's the,
Yeah, somewhere
yeah,
near
from the
the
seaside.
seaside.
Yeah, in Palo Leyte.
True,
In Palo,
true.
actually, the town after our town,
Mm, this just this
the
conversation
town
just got
next to us.
interesting. It got interesting in so many levels. Interesting. I want to talk about podcasting later and inspiration, self motivation because that's what we talk about here on the Rajiv Show. But before we
Sure.
continue this conversation, folks, we will be right back after these few short messages.
If you want to learn something new or useless about the world around you, why don't you try listening to the Banyu Podcast Reflushed on Spotify, Anchor, or any podcast app that you use?
Hey, folks, welcome back and welcome back to the show. I hope you enjoyed the first half of this conversation because it was a little bit of fur and feathers because we spoke about animals and discipline and training and stuff like that. And if you guys are interested, hopefully in the social media portion of our conversation, you'd connect with my guests, get the training, get the experience, learn something because, you know, animals, the connection between animals and human beings are um, worth something, for human beings to evolve and develop. uh, it's good to train animals because the more you train animals you train yourself, and I'm sure my guest also agrees because she's in that workspace, and I know she works, and training animals also has that correlation with training oneself. So I want to connect this conversation to podcasting. But before we get into podcasting, I gotta admit that, of course, the pandemic has hit everybody left and right with unexpected turns. And of course, everybody has a story to tell. And I want to ask my guest, in continua- in in connecting the dots between taking care of animals and taking care of the self. Uh, I gotta ask, how were you doing throughout the pandemic? I'm
Mm.
just curious to ask.
Well, it's been really crazy because um this year,
Hmm.
I think it's not just this year I just turned 25, and I could really feel the quarter life crisis. And I guess it was heightened because of the pandemic, because you can't really go out, you
Yeah.
can't explore, you can't see your friends that often.
Hmm.
So you're stuck in your room just thinking by yourself. And it's been crazy because it's been it's been a roller coaster ride with myself.
Yeah.
Um, it's just, I when you realize you're 25, I haven't done my finances in check yet, or like fixed it yet, and
Hmm.
like I don't really know what I really want to do, or like am I doing the right thing. um it's but it's the road to self discovery, I guess. You take your time to like really get to know yourself.
That's interesting, and I'm sure, just like me, because I think for all of us at home who were stuck in isolation, there were a lot of those moments. I do agree. Like there's some of those moments where questioning oneself is one of those toughest moments, especially for extroverted people. I'm not bashing on extroverted introverted here,
No, no, I am an extrovert actually,
and
and it's
I
difficult,
yeah.
especially with the pandemic, because you
Mm,
can't go out.
yeah, and the irony of everything, sometimes the paranoia comes in because sometimes for me, from based on experience, I don't know if you share the same sentiments. For me, um pre-pandemic, of course, extroverts, I don't really classify myself as an introvert, extrovert, ambivert, or inverted for that matter. It's very hard to define me, but I know one thing for sure is that I have the ability to make friends, and sometimes true colors seep through when crisis is created. I don't know if you agree with me, and you've experienced this where
Ah,
people suddenly have this, hey, I like you, can we be friends kind of situation. And then when a crisis hits them on, as they're traveling in a parallel direction, you know suddenly they turn left, instead of sticking through the promises, saying, I'm gonna be
yeah,
with you, pal, through thick and thin. We're gonna be here. And then suddenly, you
yeah,
notice when you turn around. I'm sure you've had that experience.
yeah, I have.
And the feeling about that, often, for me, I actually want to share, like, often the feeling of it, in fairness, it really sucks, and they question your life choices, whether or not, extrovertedness, introvertedness becomes a category. Because when in isolation, I actually want to share this. In isolation, it forces you to um, introspect certain things that you've done. And I think that was the main reason why I did a podcast, and why I connected and opened up my wings to people far beyond my circle. And then, meeting you guys, meeting everybody who has been a guest and who has been lovely guests, and exchange conversation. Because there's so many things more than your circle when you realize it. And I think a crisis is a good thing and a bad thing for certain people.
No, that's definitely why I also started a podcast, because I was stuck in my room. I don't know what else to do. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just start a podcast. And then with Podcast PH, like I got to like really with the group, like I got to meet you, and then I got to meet other people that commented on my post. And it's nice getting to meet new people and getting a different perspective in life.
Yeah.
And
And
also you're busy. At least you do something rather than you sulk,
true,
in your
true,
room.
true. And in fairness to everything that I've done prior to this thing, I probably make a season about this, or talk about this in further detail. During the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, basically, I want to share a little bit of life story, which I think I've shared a couple of conversations before this recording. Is that I was never that guy. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I was never that guy uh, uh, who never really has a consistency in terms of friends. And I want to share this with you because this is how I feel. I have the ability, yes, I do. As mentioned, I have the ability to connect with people at certain levels, and I don't know how I do it. If I were to philosophize it, it's really hard, you know. But I have the luck of losing people. Probably that's a nature's way of saying that certain people don't regard themselves, especially in the uh, regard with the thing, in regards with the conversations. And in college, if I may share, some few stories in high school, college, life was much more different the way I see it from my perspective, because oftentimes I never really associate myself with people in my circle, because if I may share, I'm from a music community, and I'm a fresh graduate of music. And usually the music is all about the conversation about music. And I somehow, I don't know if you also have this feeling as an extrovert, is that sometimes you don't feel like you're being a part of that community. I don't know if you've had that. Did you have that kind of experience as well?
Mhm. I think so. Like you never fit in to the
Yeah.
group. That's what you mean,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. You're not really sure. Like you're with these people and you realize, no, I just don't fit in.
Yeah. And it's I
But
don't
you're
know.
not meant to fit in.
Yeah. That's the
We're
funny
meant to
part.
stand out.
That's true. That's true. The funny part about me though is, I guess from the way I see it, coming from an Indian background, coming from a Philippine background, there's this thing called vibe, which I usually have, like, with certain people. In order to vibe with people, it's all about that. It's not just the conversation that gives you that intention. Yeah, you're vibing with certain people, and then you lock horns with the conversation, and sometimes it takes it to the next level. One thing I learned is that in my community, in the music community, I don't have that kind of sense of um, vibe with certain people. And sometimes, or most of the time, it's like forced, enforced kind of situation between me and myself, trying to fit in just to get through the school or the class, or the whatnots going on, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So often at times, like, I try to jump out of the community where I am. And then during the pandemic, I'm happy to share the same sentiments that you felt when you joined Podcast PH, is that I finally found home. And one conversation led to the other, which built this sense of I am home kind of feeling, which I do admire
And
as well. And yeah, that's the main
congrats. I
reason.
really
Yeah.
I'm really proud you actually reached the 60s, 60 plus.
Yeah. It was scary, to
Yeah.
be honest.
But yeah, well, at least you just gotta jump, you just gotta do it. That's what I always tell everyone, just do it. Just
Speaking
no,
of,
but
yeah.
also in college. No, but
Mm,
also in college, I really, yeah, I think I felt the same way. I didn't really fit in, so I to um tried to go with a different group. Like I joined the school newspaper so that I can get new, maybe fit in there.
mm.
But I also, yeah, but in a sense, yeah, I got to meet new people, so that was good too. And the same with you, the podcast really did help, and it does help because my podcast is a self-help. So whenever I talk about something, I do my research. So I would read, and then this would help me realize more and more about life, discover new things about life.
Interesting. This is a short question I gotta ask though. Are you, during the pandemic? I'm sure a lot of people, in terms of change, built their own self-awareness kind of situation when it comes to being alone. I gotta ask. For me personally, I'll share my story as well. Is that, did you ever
Mm-hmm.
build this philosophy that, okay, this is what's happening to me, probably I have to pivot or adjust my situation to adjust myself to the situation, and build a philosophy which I can stick through? And then, in short, are you philosophical during the pandemic or before the pandemic?
um I think we were forced to adapt, because if we don't, we get left behind. So I'm not the type of person who just leaves myself feeling bad about myself.
Mm,
I get up, like let's say 2 days of feeling bad about myself. On the third day, I said, no, nope, this is not me. I don't like feeling this way. So I get up. I said, how can I change this? How can I change my situation so I can feel better about myself? And then, from there, that's when I try to change again, try to adapt from the situation. Because if you don't, you'd be stuck.
I,
You'd
I
be
agree.
depressed.
I agree. I agree. The power of depression sometimes is it has that toll on you. I don't know. I do agree sometimes, especially being able to talk. I mean, if I were to be honest, if there was like this ability, I mean, I kind of have this curse, which I do believe it's a curse because um, a small story is that when there was a time, I think during the folks, for those who don't know, during the pandemic, during this moment where we when we recorded, I think a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, yeah, a week ago, I bumped into one of the legendary artists who happens to be a guest, of course, in the conversation. And then I noticed, I mean, sometimes for me, I introspect that thing about myself with certain things. Sometimes I pay attention to certain details, and this specific meeting, when I spoke to the person, it was like, the sense of like going to therapy, relieving everything that has happened, this and that. And it's like we've had that conversation during they were having lunch. If I could recall, they were having lunch, and I was just talking. And I remember, apologizing because of the main reason of talking too often. And it kind of, yeah, it's kind of like that. It's like a curse kind of thing. And believe me, if you and I had like lunch or something, if you were in town or something, believe me, I'd actually talk more than usual. But I guess that's the moral
Mm,
thing. That's the moral, humane nature of myself, which is I think
yeah.
is somewhat, it's like a demon that wants to just have a conversation, or just
No.
something like
No,
that.
but you do you. That's you.
True,
Yeah, but
true.
that's you. There's no, yeah. Be who you are. Be unapologetic about it.
Yeah. And I think
That's what I learned in college.
the funny part about this rationalization or realization is that um some people don't really like to talk to me. That's the main reason why I stray away from conversations, and I limit myself to who I talk
Mm.
to. Because one thing that I've shared, I remember this in the conversation with my teacher, my music teacher, is that I'm the type of guy who doesn't really settle in for, gossip or anything like that. The Kim Kardashian situation, like, things are not
Mm-hmm,
going well,
mm-hmm.
and then sometimes, sometimes for me, when I'm in the room and I feel the vibe, and there's this sense of awareness that I have when I'm in the room. I pay attention to a lot of details sometimes, and then when I notice that the conversation deviates to things that are uh, to things that don't really relate to me in such a way, not to say that everything relates to me, is that brings me value. That's the one thing. That's the
Yeah.
reason why I had you in this conversation, is because we have we have some kind of common ground, which is self improvement and self help. And then the
Yes.
funny thing about that is, with that common ground, we build sort of the connection to history, to philosophy, to animals, and to many things. And those are the things that I yearn for. I guess for me personally, as a human being, I think I yearn for that kind of sense of um, ability to understand human beings, because sometimes I fail to understand human beings, and I do admit that's one of my main weaknesses that I've discovered, is that I don't really know how to rationalize a certain conversation based on thing. And for me, in terms of conversations, what I really yearn, um, is that intellectual stimulation. Because if the conversation isn't stimulating, to the sense that, at the end of the day, I walk home, or I walk around my room or something, saying, hey, her philosophy or his philosophy makes sense. It challenges what I do believe in my own grounding and
Hmm.
on my foundation. That is the kind of conversation. I mean, if you pitch a
Yeah.
conversation between that, being able to debate with yourself once you're by yourself, versus a conversation about Aling Marie and son getting married. I doubt it. I doubt it if that, for me personally, that's my take. you know, uh,
No, no, but definitely. But there are people like that. You just need, I guess maybe you just haven't found your group. Like,
yeah,
there's really a group that there's, like, I have a group, like, I can just talk, like, I value what we talk about. Like, we don't just talk about, like, we don't just gossip about boys or what. We talk about,
yeah,
like, business. We talk about, like, the politics or
yeah,
stuff like that, or like why am I feeling this way, what could be
yeah.
the problem, what would be the cause. Like, you just, maybe you just haven't really found, like, your group, like,
Tribe,
where
yeah,
you don't, it isn't like, when I'm with my friends, where we can talk about that, like, it isn't an effort, like, I don't have to, it's like I don't have to work
mm,
to keep up the conversation. It's just like, just comes out naturally. Like, if I want to talk about, like, business, they also know about stuff. And I think you just really need to find that, your people,
yeah.
basically,
Tribe,
your
yeah.
group.
And yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. I love how we open from animals to human nature. I guess human nature is one of that conversation. I guess that some people have the ability to stick through it in order to understand themselves, and I think yeah, that is one thing I often wish people have. For me personally, from my perspective of how to understand things, is that human nature is an interesting thing to study. Psychology, human nature, philosophy, and history. And I'm a big believer of human nature changing its ways and causes, because personally, for me, I don't bet on change being the common cause of saying. I'm getting philosophically deep here. I hope people who are tuning in, I hope you pick up a thing or two, because you know I'm a very deep person, as you can see from this conversation alone and previous conversation where I cut deep into the meaning of why and how and everything else. I noticed that my guest also is traveling that rabbit hole with me, which is rare. I
Yeah.
really, I really, things like this, things of this nature, a conversation like this in this nature, people don't really dive much into it because it
It's
doesn't really,
scary.
yeah, it doesn't really think, talk about death, talk about the beyonds, the philosophies of being atheist, agnostic. I mean, this opens up a huge
Yeah.
wormhole into thoughts that even in theism there are certain beliefs that sometimes you often wonder and often think. And I hope if by granted I get to have you on the next seasons, we we're gonna open that wormhole, because I think in this conversation we're just gonna open into the general consensus, because the deeper we go into the conversation, the more the content becomes more complicated, and there's a lot of catching up with certain thing. But that's me in a nutshell. Yeah, it's a very very big nutshell, but
Mm-hmm.
I love to share
Yeah,
thoughts
that's
like
me
that.
too.
And
Yeah, that's
yeah,
me too, definitely.
it's just fascinating, just fascinating. um Thoughts. I really wanna crack this egg, this nutshell, or this egg that we've opened on your end, because I'm sure, of course, I've opened a lot from my end. I'm just curious, philosophy wise, or is there a
Yeah.
particular quotation where you live by before the pandemic, during the pandemic, or every single part of your life? Is there a specific philosophy that you live by, or a quotation?
Well, there's one thing that I always, yeah, there's one thing
Isabel
I always
quotation.
tell, no, there's something that I always tell myself, and I always repeat this, like, never underestimate the impact you bring on others. That came when I was in college. I went out of my apartment. I was walking, and then some old lady said, "Good morning." And I was like, wow, I feel so good. And that whole day, I felt like saying good morning to everyone else. And then I realized, wow, like just by saying someone saying good morning to me, it impacted me on a good way. So why not try to spread positivity? And ever since then, like aside from good morning, like when I would ride an elevator and then somebody would go down, I'd say, "Have a good day," something like that. I'm just it's just we there's so much negativity already around the world. Why not spread positivity? So never underestimate the impact you bring on others.
It's funny. I love that. I love that quote about positivity. But in my reflection, I'm also going to share this in my next season, which is kind of like a spoiler. For me personally, um, this may define me as a weird cookie. Well, throughout the whole conversation, I
No
think I've
judgment
already
here. No judgment here.
throughout the whole conversation, I've already defined I've established that I am really a weird cookie. Uh,
No, there's no judgment here. Be yourself.
it's funny how I look at life, the outlook of life in terms of saying, because uh, the way I see life in terms of being able to be able, being able to be human is just that challenging in nature of itself. Sometimes there are the certain things that lack in my human construct, as I could sense in my introspection, that I do empathize with certain people, and it's based on trust, and it's based on loyalties, and it's based on that. But there's also this sense that defines me from other people, is that I don't think nobody knows, is that the way I live through life is not in the positive sense of it. You know, it,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds weird the way I defined it, but the intention is, I define life in order to be alive, in order to understand life in its essence. I embrace negativity more than positivity. I don't know if I've explained it
Mm-hmm.
properly. But to simplify, because I will explain this in detail in my upcoming seasons, is that the the nature of how I do things in life is that I do the, I do see people. This is not a personal attack on people. It's just that throughout the years of isolation, not just the pandemic, mind you, there was also a year in my life where I was isolated. This was 2008 till 2015, and I've shared that story already. Is that I've isolated myself from the world. The earlier reason of isolating myself from the world was not because there was a pandemic. There was no pandemic at that time. It was because of my failures, that I could not live up to the expectation of what a normal son or a normal brother or a normal classmate could, and due to that, I took the pressure, and dumped it on me, and that negativity over the years kind of developed. So everyone who I invite, some of them stay, some of them, even if they leave, I don't have that sense of, yeah, I don't empathize. Earlier on, yes, as a child, uh, I I would agree that, yeah, I had that sense of attachment. But as the isolation goes on, I learned that the attachment becomes more easier, and peeling off the band-aid is much more easier the more you're exposed to it. I don't know if that makes sense. And it's really fascinating. It's just fascinating how I guess trained myself to understand that in order for me to live, I have to be negative.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be negative enough to know that, like for example, just to put this into context, if someone else is better than me in terms of what they do, they earn my respect regardless. But deep down inside, I also want to have that competitive feeling, and that is where it's like the yin and yang. I take both the white and the black, um, positive, negative connotations of the idea of how I see a person. So there's that love I have, which is the respect, and then of course deep down inside, which I don't share because being able to share that to certain people will say something negative about myself, which normally once I say I hate a person because of what they do, they'll only notice the negative side of that conversation. But if I say, you know, I hate the person but I respect him, that's the balance of how I see human beings, which is mostly interpreted to the point that yeah, this guy's a negative, toxic kind of person. I don't know if that made sense, but yeah.
Ah, well, that's something new, you know. But for me, I think like I'm a positive person, but I still embrace the negative. You can't always be positive, positive, positive.
Mm,
Like you have to embrace the negative as well. Um, but you do you. But that's just something new that I just learned now that they're,
yeah.
you know,
And
yeah, that's a new one.
yeah, the main knowledge, the main awareness that I have towards this reasoning that I had is my understanding. I'm a cinephile, and I was inspired by two documentaries and one interview. And I want to share this actually for those who are tuning in. You guys got to check out the Valuetainment interview of Patrick David Bett to Tim Grover. And of course, for those who don't know who Tim Grover is, Tim Grover is the main guy who trained Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, NBA, Dwayne Wade, and countless others athletes, and he's reached to the point that he's done, I think, two books about winning and being a different animal from the rest. And we opened that conversation, you be you kind of situation. And then he philosophized. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there are two interviews. The first interview is unfiltered, but don't take the unfiltered as a form of like Gary Vaynerchuk. He says a lot of those explicit words, but you should take the value because of what he's saying. And the second one is an interesting thing about winning, the price you pay in winning in life itself. It's very deep. It's very deep, and if I cut it deep enough, it takes its own. It is like a monster in itself. And then these two documentaries about Michael Jordan, which is The Last Dance, which really blew my mind to the psyche and the killer instinct that Michael Jordan has when he competed and won six championships. And then his best friend, which is a two-part HBO series called Tiger Woods. I'm sure we both know who Tiger Woods is, and he
Yeah.
also has the
Yeah.
competitive thing. But of course, Tiger and Michael Jordan's personality is much more different than Tiger, and the fame and the way they've changed the game in their specific field. One is Tiger Woods is in the game of golf and basketball. You can take majority of what they did in philosophy as a form of application in your life, which is just different. I guess the definition of being a different animal in that context is just that the way they breed, the way they see competitors is like they want to dominate and they want to kill, and they at the moment they want to kill the people because they want to prove that they're thing. And for me, I guess when I have a conversation with people or debate with, it's like it's not really about the point of being right anymore. Sometimes for me, sometimes, and in reflection, I
Mm-hmm.
realize that I just really want to win the conversation.
The conversation.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
no.
Sometimes, but I also do rationalize in terms of reflection. I do rationalize and how to come up with the thing. But that's my nature in terms of thing. I'm not saying that I'm gonna be the next Michael Jordan in my field, but who knows? That's just the
Who
mindset, I
knows?
guess. That's just the mindset
Dream
that I've
big.
built. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I've spoken a lot about myself. I want to talk about you. I mean, what mindset have you
Mm-hmm.
developed in terms of, aside from of course the mindset of just staying alive? I'm sure there were also a lot of stuff that you often, you know, build upon yourself during the pandemic. I gotta ask.
During the pandemic,
Or even after, like even in college. I forgot to ask, were you the in high
oh,
school, you said you were an introverted nerdy type person, but were you
yeah,
also the
yeah.
competitive type of person when it came to certain things,
No,
certain, or it
I don't
only
think
thing?
so.
So
I don't
when
think
did
so. But in college, that changed. In college, that changed. I was I was out more. Like I was more close to the teachers. I was more active in school. I was into the groups and all. But in college, here's the thing. In college, I didn't really fit in. Like people weren't really okay with me, with what I wore, how I talked, how I was, or who I was. So I really tried to change myself so that I'll be accepted. But then on my last year I realized, oh, this is too much. I went through hoops, like I bent over backwards just to fit in, and then they still didn't accept me. So in college, in my last year I was like, that's it, I'm done. I'm just gonna be myself, and whatever whatever they think of me, it doesn't even matter anymore. But at least I'm myself. I'm happy. I didn't do anything to them. Life goes on. And that's how it is, I think. And that's how it should be. You shouldn't really, because people will really have something to say.
hmm,
So let them. If you're not hurting anyone, or you're not stepping on anyone, I don't think there's a problem.
powerful?
Right?
Yeah, I do agree. I do agree. This has been a powerful educational conversation that we took it to the next level in terms of philosophy and otherwise. I would love to open this conversation some more to deeper understanding, cutting the cake
Yeah.
even deeper. But of course,
Sure. Try
it
me.
requires, uh, based on how we've had the conversation, it looks like it requires another, call, another collaborative thing. But I love it. I love it. I can't deny that I'm enjoying this conversation. And um as always, I never really put expectations to my guests towards pressuring them about what we're going to talk about, because granted, every piece of conversation is always a piece of gold at some point, depending on who collects the gold.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of
Yeah.
conversations, of course, as deep as our conversation is, um if my listeners out there would love to connect with you via social media, how would they connect with you via social media?
They can follow me on my Instagram. It's at Isa L Jimenez. Isa with a double S. So ISSAL, then GIMENEZ on Instagram.
Awesome.
That's it.
Awesome. First of all, I want to
I don't have Twitter.
first of all, I want to say thank you for accepting my call, and I'm glad we pulled something strange out of the rabbit hat and connected at least. I mean, that's how the Rajiv show. So, I want to say thank you so much to Isabel for this conversation. I learned a lot. I mean, I've said a lot, but also as I've been speaking, I've also learned a lot about my guests. And to be honest, in my heart, conversations like this are dime a dozen. In my experience with people that I've met through the years, I'd love to stay connected with folks like these, because there's something in life that you'll always miss out, that someone will know that you don't know. And I really am fascinated to learn more, and hopefully, like I said, open up a conversation where we could open it up and discuss a lot of these introvert intro introspection, because probably on my next series, of course, the season, I'm gonna talk a little bit deep about the things that I've learned and how human I am and how non-humanistic I am sometimes in terms of reflection. But yeah, like I said, if once I open this conversation here, it's gonna require a long long term of time of editing, which is the weirdest is worst feeling ever. So yeah. And yeah, my editor himself, shout out to my editor who is technically me, uh doesn't want to edit a long piece of conversation, if you know what I mean. It's just it's just a weird feel. It's just a hard feeling for humans like me to edit a long 2-hour conversation, which so far hasn't been happening. So yeah. uh, like I said, I want to thank you for being here, being part of this conversation, and
But
hopefully, yeah, yeah.
thank you so much also for having me. It was really fun.
And for those who are listening, I want to say thank you so much for the countless support. We have hit the pinnacle um, of all conversations, which is 61, and like I said, I haven't said this before. Why am I saying like I said? This feeling of hitting 61 may never happen for me in the next upcoming seasons. Most likely, I may never even beat this record of 61 episodes in a season. So I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for tuning in and listening and learning and connecting with my guests. I mean, from I am happy to and proud to do this, to be able to do this and to share and to connect and collaborate with a lot of fine people. So I want to say thank you to everybody, and thank you so much for listening. And I hope someday you get to meet these these guests of mine, because all of them are legends according to my books. So yeah, including my guest today. So I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, and cheers. As always, I will see you in my next episode.